Hey folks, are your favorite dice rolling far too many nat ones? Well, it might be a time for a stint in dice jail. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this amazing, beautiful tabletop accessory for all of your dud dice. We'll be using the Boolean modifier, the array modifier, some simple modeling, and also how to add text so you can add whatever you want on the front there. This is a beginner-friendly, bite-sized tutorial. It's super easy, super quick, super fun, and without further ado, let's get started. All right, folks, let's start as we always do and say hello to our old friend, the default cube, before quickly clicking on him, hitting X, and saying farewell to our old friend, the default cube. Now, for our dice jail, what we want is basically a top and a bottom, and then the bars in between it. So let's start by going Shift A and adding mesh and adding a cylinder. Now, this is going to be much too large. If you look in the side panel over here, you'll see that in my scene properties panel in my units, make sure that your lengths are set to centimeters. That's going to be important for us when we 3D print this later. Now, you'll see here that this cylinder has 32 vertices. That's way too many. That's basically each face here. We have 32 of them. So let's change that to 8 and get this lovely octagon shape. Now, the radius is 100 centimeters. That is much too large. For this, I want it to be, I gave it a quick measure. I want mine to be 7 centimeters. Actually, I want it to be 7 centimeters diameter. So 3.5 radius, because the radius is half of the diameter. You'll now see that it's really long. That's we don't need that at all because it's 200 centimeters deep. Let's change that to 1.5. You can leave the cap fill and all of the rest the same and hit enter. And now if you zoom in, you'll see that I have this nice chunky hexagonal shape. Now we could make this a little bit shallower, but I'm going to add some text to this later. So let's leave that nice and chunky. Cool. That is now done. What we can do now is work on the bars. Now, this isn't going to be a very good dice jail if it doesn't have any dice jail bars, so let's do that part now. Now, in the top corner here, where this is cylinder, I'm just going to name this base, so when I start making the other parts, I don't forget what is what. Now, if I hit Shift and A, add a mesh and a cylinder, you'll see here that I've already pre-practiced this, so I have my shape here already. But what we want to do is change the vertices to 32, to make it more cylindrical, because before it was set to 8, which was our octagonal shape. But if we change this to 32, that will be enough there for it to be, enough of a circle when we 3D print this. I'm going to change the radius to 0.4 here to give us that bar shape, and then I'm going to change the depth to 7 centimeters, which will give us the length. Now, if I hit 1 to go into side view, I'm then going to hit G and Z, and we're going to move this up on the Z axis till it's sunk in our base. Doesn't need to be too much, but let's say about there. And that is perfect. Now, obviously, our jail bar shouldn't be in the middle. That looks more like a dancing pole than it does a jail, but we can sort that out right now. So if you've done my other tutorials, we're going to use a modifier we have used before in the beginner series, which is the array modifier. Now, this will be really cool to use. Now, if you look at the pole, you'll see here that there's a little dot in the middle of it. That is essentially the alignment point or the pivot point of that object. Now, if I hit R to rotate this on the x-axis, you'll see that it rotates using that pivot point as its reference of where to move it around. So if we, I'll just hit Control Z, if we move anywhere and if we move our object but keep that pivot point, we can then move things around that pivot point, like an array, for example, like creating more objects. So if I go into edit mode and if I move this now, if I go grab this on the Y in object mode, you'll see that the pivot point moves with the object. Now, if I go into edit mode and I then grab this on the Y and I move this out here, you'll see in edit mode, the pivot point stays where it is, which is exactly what we want to do right now. So leaving that pivot point where it is, if I now go into my modifier menu and I go to generate and then to array, you'll see here now that it's going to add more of the poles. But right now it's set to line. So if I keep adding these in, it's just going to add them in a line. Now, if I say, okay, well, let's add this in a circle, it will add it in a circle around the alignment point. You can see here that it's highlighted. Now, if I change that to 8, because we have 8 faces, suddenly we now have 8 perfect bars for our dice jail. And that's it. Moving on to the next part. We're speeding through. Now, to make the lid of this dice jail, thankfully, we already have the beginnings of the lid because we have the base. So to make our lives very easy, let's hit 1 to go into side view mode. Let's click the base, and then let's hit Shift D to duplicate it, and then hit Z to duplicate it on the Z axis. Now, if I move this up, you'll see that it's going to move all the way up on the Z axis. Now, what I want to do is I don't want to rest it on top of these poles. I want to sink it in. So the poles are basically sinking into it a little bit. And I'll show you why. If I go up here and I go into the wireframe mode, you'll see that we have the poles sunk in here and the poles sunk in here. I'm going to just grab that on the Z-axis so it kind of matches the other side. This just means that we're going to have a nice fit there. The poles are going to be sunk into our top, meaning that when we push fit this all together, it'll be nice and secure. So you don't want it too loose, but you don't want it in too much where it becomes a pain having to push them right in there. But that is looking absolutely great. Now, the next part we need is obviously an opening to get these dice into this dice jail. So how will we do that? Well, we can go into edit mode and we can hit 3 to go into face select. Let's hit this face and then hold shift and hit the bottom face and then hit I to inset a face. And then we're going to move this in, and I'm just going to move it into about, so it's just past the poles here, just about here, I would say, which is great. Now, you need to make sure that this is the right size for your dice. So if you have some kind of jumbo dice, I have these quite big dice here, if you see in the bottom right corner. You want to measure these up first to make sure that you have enough space for your dice to drop in there. I did that already. But here you go. That will be plenty for this. And then I'm just checking that it looks neat at the bottom. And then I'm going to hit X and I am going to delete faces. So now we have this gap running through here. Very easy. All we need to do is hit 2 to go into edge select and hit that edge and that edge there. And then hit F to create a face. Now, I've done this before many times in my tutorials. If you hit that edge, now what we can do is if we hit F, it's going to keep following along and filling in all those other faces. How neat is that? So now we have our dice jail pretty much complete. I mean, this works. You drop the dice in the top and they're in jail somewhere finally for all of those naughty dice. Wonderful. Okay, so how can we, spice this up a little bit and make it a little bit more interesting? Well, let's do that right now. Okay, cool. Well, this is looking like a pretty good dice jail to me, but I think we can make this a bit more visually interesting by adding some other elements and some embellishments to really bring this to life. So let's start by working on the base and the lid or the top at the same time. And we can do that by hitting the bottom, then hitting the top one while holding shift. And then when we go into edit mode, we have both highlighted. Cool. So let's hit Control R and then bring up the loop cut menu and then scroll up to add 2 loop cuts to the top of this. Then hit Control R again and add 2 more loop cuts in the middle of that one. Now, copy exactly the same on the bottom. Control R to bring up the loop cut menu, then scroll and then double click to accept that. Then add another loop cut, then add another 2 loop cuts in the middle there. Now, I want to be able to grab that middle line in those 2 loop cuts that I made on the top and the bottom. So to do that, hit 3 to go into face select mode, hold Alt, and then click, if you zoom in, click the line, the connecting line, and it will grab all the faces all the way around. If I was to grab that line, for example, it will grab all the faces in that direction. So go right near the edge there and then hit Alt and click. And then we want to get that bottom line. And to do that, we're going to hold Shift, which means we're going to keep adding stuff, and then hit Alt and click that line, which grabs that other line. Now, in this menu up here, you'll see that we have the Transform Pivot Point menu. In there, we want to make sure that we transform by individual origins, which will be the pivot point, each pivot point for each piece. If I do 3D cursor, if I try and scale these, you'll see that they scale awkwardly to where the 3D cursor is, which we don't want. If I now try and scale this by median point, it's going to put them in the middle, which we also don't want. What we want is, if we, let me come out of there. If we set this to individual origins, now when we scale it, they'll scale in neatly, which is exactly what we want. So let's bring those in a little bit. And now already we have this cool kind of like Roman plinth style look, which I really like. And to add to this, on the bottom one, if I hit the bottom base here and I hit Alt and hit the bottom, go into 2 and hit Alt and then grab that bottom line with edge select, I'm going to scale this out a little bit too. Just a little bit like that. So it looks like this. Wow, that's looking really, really cool. And there we go. Now we just have some visual interest and some extra topology, extra geometry there, making the thing just look a bit more polished. Now, let's add a big nasty sign on the front saying jail or dice jail or bad dice or whatever we want. Let's add a really cool sign to the front of this dice jail. Okay, to do this, what I'm first going to do is if I hit 1 to align the front, you'll see that I'm getting just this single pole here and this line. It's not aligning well to like the flat of this surface, which would be a much easier, nicer way to add like another face or a sign to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select everything, and then I'm going to rotate it on the Z by 22.5. And that will turn it just slightly. So it is now square with our, if you look there, it's now square with our axes, which will make this next part a lot easier. The reason it's 22.5 is because 360 degrees of a circle divided into 8 for the 8 sides that we have is 45. And then to do just a slight turn on there, like half a turn, I just halved 45 to 22.5. Okay, so now let's add a new object. Shift A, mesh, and then let's add a cube. Hit S to scale and bring the cube right down to like about here, and then grab it and then on the Z-axis and bring it up. Let's scale it on the Z-axis like this, and then let's also scale it on the X-axis and bring it down like so, and then grab it on the X-axis, and I'm going to move it so these two bars intersect it essentially. You know, they cut right through it. Cool. And then let's scale this on the Y a little bit. I just want it to be, you know, just a little sign on the front there. Very neat. Very, very cool. That is looking pretty cool. Just make sure there's enough space there. I'm going to scale it on the X a tiny bit. Yeah, no point in making our life difficult. We don't want the edges to be too fragile, because what I'm going to do is we're actually going to pierce through this with these bars. So when we assemble it, it'll slide, the sign will actually slide right on. So I want to make sure that there's no like, we don't want it to be too weak on the sides here, but this looks like it will be perfect. Great. And now to add a bit more visual interest to our sign, let's go into edit mode and then hit 3 to go into face select. Select this face and then hit I to inset. And then let's just inset just a little bit like that. And then I'm going to grab that face on the X-axis and just bring it in just a little bit, just to create a little bit of a cool lip on it. Yeah, I like how that looks. Okay, cool. Now, let's add in our text. I have other tutorials on adding text, but let's just go through it one more time really quickly here. So, and if you haven't seen those tutorials, you'll see it right now. So we're going to add in our text here. So you just go Shift, Add, and then Shift A, and then Add, and then Text to add the text. And then if I hit, if I go into edit mode, I can then edit my text. So I am going to put bad dice. That's going to be my sign for mine. And then if you go to the side panel here, you can see the data properties here. This is where we can edit the text, we can edit the spacing and everything. Right now, I'm going to edit the alignment, and I'm going to center this up. I'm then going to go back into object mode, and I'm going to scale this right down, scale it right down. Let's rotate it 90 on the x-axis so it's facing the right way, and then rotate it 90 on the z so it's now facing the same way as our sign, and then grab it on the x to bring it out, and then we can scale it down a little bit. Now if I hit 1, actually let's hit 3 to go inside view, and then I hit G, and then grab it on the z-axis and put it right in the middle of the sign. That is looking pretty good. Bad dice is so silly to me. Okay, cool. I'm going to grab this on the X, move this back so it's there. And then what we need, because right now this is just a text object, so this is just a bunch of curves. What we can do is if we go into the geometry tab on the side, if you go to here where it says extrude, just bring that up a little bit, scroll a little bit until the text is sticking out just a little bit. You know, it's given the text a little bit of geometry. Now what we can do is if I hit that and I hit G and then I go X and I bring this back, we want it to rest just in the sign a little bit. So it's just sitting a little bit proud of that, that face. So just move it around a little bit till you feel comfortable with it. Cool. And now we have our dice jail finished. I am loving this. So you can just sit this on the table, you keep rolling nat ones, critical fails, and get that dice in here so it knows what it's done and try and get some of that bad luck out of it. Cool. So there's a few finishing things we need to do right now to make sure that when we print this, it's all going to print well and fit together nicely. So let's go through the finishing touches right now. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is name my objects. So let's hit this cylinder, and I'm going to change that to bars. Then I'm going to hit the bottom part, and it's already base. Hit the top part, and I'm going to change that to top. And then this part I'm going to change to sign. Cool. Now, this wouldn't fit together because right now we don't have any holes in any of our models. If I hide those, you'll see that there's nowhere for those poles to sit in. So that's going to be the first step. If I look at those bars here, if I hit the base and I go to the modifier panel and I add a modifier and generate a Boolean modifier, and I can do difference, if I click on the bars as our object, and then if I hide those bars, you'll see now that it has Booleaned out space for those bars to sit. Very nice. So now I'm just going to rinse and repeat. So if I take the lid there, and then I go add modifier, generate Boolean, make sure difference is set. If you do union, it will attach them together. If you do intersect, it will cut out and just keep the piece that is intersecting. So difference is what we're using for this one. And again, I'm going to click and then select the bars as my object. You can also click here and get it from the drop-down menu. But if you have lots of objects, sometimes it's easier just to use the little eyedropper. And now if I hide those bars again, just to check, they've taken it out at the top as well. Looking good, looking good. Now, same thing we need to do is for our sign here. Now, if I hit generate Boolean and then hit the bars again, if I hide the bars, you'll see that it's running right through our sign. Very, very cool. Okay, finally, we have this text on the front of our sign that is not part of the sign yet. So we need to rectify that as well. Let me just check I'm happy with the positioning of it, which I believe I am. I think that looks pretty good. Actually, I can move it. I'm going to grab it on the Y just a little bit, just a teeny tiny bit. Oh. You're going to tell me in the comments now that that looks wrong, but hey, I'm rolling with it. I like it. Cool. And now the same thing. This is still a text object, and we can see because it has the little A down here. What we need to do is turn this into a mesh rather than lines. So we can do that by going convert to mesh. Now that this is a mesh, it actually has some geometry that we can work with the Boolean modifier, because the Boolean modifier doesn't work with curves. So we're just going to do the same thing with our sign selected. I'm going to add another Boolean modifier to this and hit the object and then hit the text. And there you go. Now, if I hide the text, you'll see here that it's cut out. It says bad dice in there, which is great. Now, your choice, you can either have it cut out or you can have it be a union. If you want it to sound, you can have use the union instead and have it stand a little bit proud. And that's what I'm going to do on mine. I'm going to have that stand a little bit proud. But that is it, folks. We have everything finished. All we need to do now is print this up, and we can do that by exporting each of the files. Now, we may need to adjust our poles just a tiny bit, but we can do that in our slicing software just to make sure that it fits neatly within our prints, because the tolerances right now would be a little bit too tight, but we can adjust that when we print it and it will all be perfect. So let's export these as STLs now, and then we're all good to go. Okay, so to export these as STLs is actually pretty simple. All we need to do is select them one object at a time. So I'm going to select the lid here. We don't even need to accept the Booleans because we can do that at export. So what we can do is go File, Export, STL, and then in this menu, just make sure Apply Modifiers is selected, and that will apply all the modifiers that we've attached. So we can name it whatever we want. I'm going to name this part Dice Jail Lid, and then V1, because in 3D printing or 3D modeling, I end up with, sometimes V25 as I'm trying to get something exactly as I wanted. The creative process can be a lot of fun sometimes. So, just save that as whatever you want, and then I'm going to do the same for the bars, File, Export, STL, and then I'll just change that to Dice Jail Bars, and make sure Selection Only and Apply Modifiers. Then we'll do the base, File, Export, STL, change that to base, Export, and then just the sign, File, Export, STL, sign, boom, Export, STL, and there we have it. We have all the files. So the next thing to do is to pop this in the slicer, get it going, and then let's see how this looks. And there you have it, folks. You've made your very own awesome dice jail. Doesn't this thing look incredible? Let me know what you end up writing on the front of yours. I'd really like to see. And if you've really enjoyed this tutorial, please like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that good stuff. I'm doing new tutorials every week, as well as build videos, tips and tricks, all that good stuff. If you've enjoyed this, please maybe check out some of my other videos. I think you might enjoy them. And if you haven't subscribed, I would really, really appreciate it. I've been Copper Thumb. You've been awesome. I'll see you in the next one.